Good evening, everybody. PYXERA Global India, in partnership with India Leaders for Social Sector, welcome you to this webinar on building synthesis between the corporate and social sectors. This webinar is all about the leap of faith. And we are basically going to be talking about what happens when corporate sector professionals who are thinking about this leap of faith or who have made the leap of faith, moving from one sector to the other. And also in terms of the transformation and the challenges. While it is a transformative journey and there are challenges, how do we basically leverage the value add that a corporate sector professional could bring to the social sector to make this a harmonious journey for both sides? With us today, we have Anu Prasad and Shakti Saran. Anu is the founder and CEO of India Leaders for Social Sector, a Delhi-based nonprofit that works to strengthen the leadership talent pool in the social sector. Before setting up ILSS in 2017, Anu was the founding deputy dean of the prestigious Young India Fellowship and a founding member of Ashoka University, India's first liberal arts university. Anu held leadership roles at multinational companies like American Express and TNT in the past. An entrepreneur at heart, Anu has also co-founded and managed a successful travel company. She has been a consultant for Dell Foundation on its education projects and sits on the board of 2 nonprofit organizations. Anu graduated from HR College, Mumbai, and received her MBA from IMI, New Delhi. We also have Shakti Saran. Shakti is a former management consultant and corporate sector executive who crossed over to the social sector in 2017. He works as a senior fellow at PYXERA Global India. At PYXERA Global, Shakti has supported partnership building with several sector organizations throughout India and worked on many capacity building projects for Indian NGOs and nonprofits. He has worked with leading corporations instilling awareness of the need to proactively embrace community building and served on the board of trustees of We Care Foundation, a cancer care NGO. His journey in the nonprofit sector reveals that aspiring for a thriving humanity and planet calls for nothing less than a systems view of life and a courageous heart. He is an alum of India Leaders for Social Sector, Radical Transformation Leadership, Impact Academy, and has certifications in systems thinking from eCornell and Capra Corp. So with that, Shakti, I'm handing this over to you to get this discussion going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Shilpa. So hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I just want to narrate a short story that the first time I met Anu was, it was through a common friend. And I had just, made the decision to cross over to the social sector. And I was looking out for openings, where could I channelize my energies? And this friend of mine said, look, I have a friend, let me connect you with her. And, I called Anu, I was on the road, I spoke to her and I said, I'm so-and-so asked me to reach out to you. And, can you help me with an opening? And at that point of time, Anu was with the Central Square Foundation. And she said, then when we got further into the conversation, she said, I'm going to be in Bombay in about 10 days. And I'm happy to just meet up with you. And we're going to be launching something new. It's going to be called the India Leaders for the Social Sector. So, happy to meet you. Why don't you come and meet me? So I went and met her. This was about an hour before the ILSS launch, started. And we had a really very fruitful conversation. And the next thing I did was to attend the ILSS program. And the next thing I did after the ILSS program, I went back home that night and I signed up for it. So that couldn't have been a more opportune moment, for me to, as I was just thinking of, getting into this sector. And I just want to say in one sentence right now that the ILSS program was just exceptionally powerful. It is really what propelled me to make that leap of faith. And I just want to acknowledge, Anu for, her role in my journey. It's been a very significant role. And Anu, also thank you very much for agreeing to, get onto this, to having this conversation, sort of much appreciated. Right. So what we decided, Anu and myself, when I first reached out to her, I said, I want you as a speaker, and then she said, no, Shakti, why don't we just make this a two-way conversation? So that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to ask each other a set of questions, and after that, we're going to throw it open for, Q&A. So Anu, let me just begin by asking you, what made you think of, ILSS, the very idea of ILSS, and what have been some of the challenges that you experienced?
So thank you firstly, Shakti, for inviting me. And I'm so delighted to see all the participants here to listen to what we have to share. And it's really important, Shakti, to hear really from you, your lived experiences since since you crossed over. And so I'm going to come to that. But quite frankly, in any sector, there are shifting trends. What happens is what was happening here was with CSR, with the philanthropy. There was a lot of funding that was private funding that was coming into the sector, but there was also this concern that the sector is fragmented. It's a lot of very small nonprofits, and if you count on your two hands, you probably get 100 crore sized NGO. A lot of leadership, founder driven, but where's the leadership bench? And coincidentally, while we were grappling with this idea, Britspan came out with a seminal report where they spoke to 250 nonprofits, and the report was startling, where almost 97% of them said that they didn't have a succession planning in place, and they didn't feel like within the sector they had their leaders, etc. I mean, it was a pretty long, and I would recommend everyone to read that report. But it got us thinking that this is a sector that requires all of us to engage with. After all, the problems are not, we're not away, we're not removed from them. As active, engaged citizens, we all need to sort of come together and be a part of the solution. But where are the people? I was a crossover. I crossed over, in a way, a decade before. But maybe there are people like me who really want to learn, who want to understand, who want to engage, who are looking for some purpose that's bigger than what they're doing currently. How do we engage them? And where do I find them? Like I found you. And so there was that challenge. And of course, for anything that you're starting out with, Shakti, you do research. So I must have spoken to more than 100, 150 nonprofit leaders saying, hey, we're thinking of bringing in talent, which will bring in skill sets that will complement existing skill sets: project management, change management, financial, operations, technology. Would there be a need? Would there be a requirement for such kind of skill sets? And it was, the response was unanimous. Yes, we do want people, but we do want to know. There was a sense of wariness. Shakti, when I started, people would say, oh, 2 out of 3 corporates actually cross over and then cross right back because they find the orientation very problematic. That was, I don't know where it came from. I can't back that statistics, but it used to be something commonly shared. So we said, let's actually put them through a learning journey, because it's unpacking the sector, but with true humility, that you're coming into a space that's very different. It's far more difficult. There's a lot of systemic thinking that you need to do, which I will talk to you about, Shakti. So with how do you engage and how do you learn? So I think ILSS, the challenges were first to find the people, to validate our research, and then run the program. And we designed the program in a way I wish somebody had designed for me when I was doing the crossover. So that's been the journey, and you were pretty much one of my first participants and signups. And I must also quickly tell you, Shakti, that the lady who introduced us still hasn't made that leap of faith and is still talking about it. And I'm like, just do it. Shakti has moved on and had such a wonderful career after, and you're still thinking about it. So, but Shakti, really want to hear from you, because while we may run the program, you've had a lived experience. So what was it for you? What got you going?
So the genesis in my case was, the underlying real reason was a shift to an environment that was less combative and more collaborative. It was like, I'd been very tired of the quarterly mindset, the very narrow short-term mindset, of working with the corporate sector. And I had been in the corporate sector for just also very long. If there had been an ILSS in my mid-career, I won't have waited that long. But anyway, to answer your question, it was that was the underlying reason, to move away from something which is just too narrow and too short-sighted. And also a very aggressive atmosphere, to something that was just more qualitative. It was a warmer, nicer feeling about, about being yourself. What is it? So it was really the quest for purpose. Yeah, that was the main driver for, wanting to make this move. Yeah, what am I, beyond a point, money just has diminishing utility. So, it had to be, what is my purpose in life? So these were the questions that I was asking myself. But really, Anu, there were two triggers. One trigger and one catapult that made me, want to cross over. So the first trigger was, when I was at IBM in 2011, we celebrated our centenary year. And our chairman then urged every single employee, and we were 400,000 employees across the globe, to take on a day of service on IBM Pay. Yeah, it was not mandatory, but everyone was sort of urged, and that was IBM's way of acknowledging to the community that this is how we're going to celebrate our 100 years. So I had signed up for what was meant to have been an 8-hour volunteering stint with the We Care Foundation and a cancer care NGO, and I quite liked the work that Vandana and her team were doing out there. So I decided to continue supporting them. So I supported them, and I'm currently on their board of trustees. So that was a trigger. And then the catapult was, IBM had launched a program called IBM Corporate Service Corps. And this was, sort of derived from the US-based Peace Corps experience. And it's a social sabbatical. They still have it. It's in a slightly different form than what it was when I was sent to Morocco for a whole month. And we were 15 of us from 10 different countries on a social sabbatical, supporting, NGOs and nonprofit organizations in capacity building. And so on my flight back from Casablanca to Bombay, I had kind of sort of made up my mind that, this was a very life-changing moment for me. And I said, this is really what I want to do with the rest of my life. And then I started my search, and then I ran into you, and then there's the ILSS. So basically that's how this all unfolded.
No, absolutely, and wonderful. But what has it been for you since? How has it been these last 4 years?
So it's been an enormous, it's been a splendid experience, but not without its challenges. It's been splendid because of the learning, and it's been, let me just put it actually in one word. If I was to use one word, it's just been very enlightening. It's just been that there is just so much of life that, so much to life that I was not aware of, only because when you're working with a corporate mindset, you're limited. You're limited by the organization's mandate or shareholder returns, whatever you call. And I think that it's just been a journey of discovery and getting to meet very interesting people, getting to understand, how these challenges have become challenges, and what can be done, to make life more harmonious, to kind of move in the direction of a thriving humanity and a thriving planet. And we all know that it's staring at us in our face, the challenges that we have. Somebody has to, and I'm just like one small tiny cog in this larger, in this larger system. But I just feel so glad that life has given me this opportunity to, to be able to channelize my energies into something like this.
Absolutely.
So Anu, let me, ask you a question, because I was in the inaugural batch, and I remember, we joked about it that we were the guinea pigs, right? But ILSS has evolved over the last 4 years, and so my question to you was, for a person who is planning to make a move, to what extent is there fresh learning, and to what extent is there unlearning? Yeah, it's if you could just sort of share that as your insights for the people who are on this webinar today, that would just be very helpful.
Sure, absolutely. There is an unlearning, relearning that does happen, Shakti. I do agree. I do, as you know, we do get to know our participants before they even come into the program. We spend some time with essays, a lot of protests on those essays when I would request them. But it was a way of getting to know people, and also our interview. There was a reason, Shakti. It was because we are looking for people with the humility to submit to a new kind of learning. and to have deep respect for where they are coming. It's a complex space. It's a very challenging space. And I don't want people, at least not at ILSS, coming here with for the wrong reasons. The red flags for us when people say, oh, I'm just looking to chill now. I mean, are you kidding me? You won't work harder than you will work here. I can tell you that. So, just the right sort of attitude, the humility to listen, these are integral to even coming into, at least at ILSS. I'm not a gatekeeper for the sector, but for me, I have deep respect for everyone that works here. And I want that to be instilled in our participants coming into the program. I think it's a lot of unpacking that happens. I can almost sense the aha moments happening in class, Shakti, you've been there.
Yes.
Because
yes.
quite frankly, you don't even know what you don't know.
Right.
And unfortunately, we've lived in such silos, and this is true even today. 270 leaders and 12 versions of the program later, I still have the same experiences happening where there's a lot of unpacking, where you're suddenly understanding how systemic the issues are, and you can't solve in isolation, and you must understand holistically where are the challenges. Because if you come with a savior mindset or a rescue mindset and don't really understand the sector, and you give it with deep empathy, you might be solutioning for the wrong thing. And we have histories on that. I mean, policies are based on that. So I won't even go into that. But I think for us, we feel like if you go through a program and you do become active, Shakti, as you know, in the course, there's no case studies because we feel like you're not yet ready to solution. Maybe spend more time listening, ask questions, ask 1,000 questions, but let's wait for the solutions to arrive. So I think I can't speak broadly for everyone what goes on for them, but one of the things that is very key for us, and you've been through it, so maybe you can talk a little bit more, is the whole inner journey. When you understand the why of why you're here, it'll hold you at the times when it's really difficult to be here. So which is the radical transformation. And, I will ask you too, because I've had alumni come back to me. Initially, when it's a part of our program, people would say, why do we have to do this leadership journey where we are going inwards and trying to understand our motivations? And we'd say, wait, it's important. But now I hear people saying that, when the going gets really tough and when it's very frustrating and when we are feeling at our lowest in the work we do in the development sector, we come back to that thing that is the reason why we came. We hold on to that, and that keeps us going. So in fact, coming back to you, given that you've done the radical transformation, the whole leadership journey, what was some of that kept you going? Because it was tough. I'm sure times were tough, right?
Right. So, talking about transformation and talking about leadership and talking about systems, it actually started with ILSS, the session that Sudarshan Rodriguez took. It was, I found it as one of the most powerful sessions, when I was at ILSS. And, that session about what do you stand for? And when we went around the table and I said, look, I stand for oneness and harmony for myself and others, so it was just very, very powerful. And that was the first time that, I had heard of, my ignorance, that I had heard of systems in the space of social sciences, where I came from an IT background. I worked with IBM for 15 years. And for me, systems meant IT systems, software systems, hardware systems. We were systems integrators. But the whole thing about a system, like racism is a system. It's systemic racism. That's why we call it. Being applied to social sciences just blew my mind. It was, and then I progressed further. After ILSS, I continued the transformation journey with some other programs that Sudarshan is affiliated with. And there I just discovered that, that there's this whole thing about, about systems for social sciences, which has got to do with, altering systemic norms, making cultural shifts, life diminishing norms need to be altered. Or in the world of business, we hear, changing paradigms. So it's very akin to that. How do you change paradigms? If you have a new payment system in the commercial world, that's changing paradigms. So the equivalent of changing paradigms is about changing behavior, social behavior, at a systemic level. And I found that, extremely, extremely intriguing, actually, when I was first, got exposed to it. And then I also realized that this is whole new, discipline, you could call it a discipline or a focus of systems change. And there's a lot of systems change practitioners. But then I also realized that systems change is just the application of something which is underlying, which is systems thinking. And then that got me to, further probe as to what is systems thinking. And then I took on, a course or two courses in systems thinking. So it's a great frame of understanding. It just helps in improving your mental models of what you're trying to solve. Because the social space is fairly polarized, and if we can find ways and means to, sort of reduce that polarization. So systems thinking is, I saw that as the answer. It helps one in removing bias, and it helps one to kind of gravitate to reality as objectively and through the medium of universal values. So that's just been my experience, and I'm trying to apply it in everything that I do in the social sector with PYXERA Global and beyond. So,
Yeah,
so Anu, go ahead.
No, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Shakti, for everyone that's listening here.
So Anu, let me come back to you. We spoke about crossovers, ILSS, but I'm just keen to know, how do you define a crossover? In your parlance, what is a crossover? And I ask you this question as a related question to it. Does everybody, from ILSS, or how many people actually make that leap of faith? So if you could help just throw, your perspective on this, that would be very useful and very helpful.
No, absolutely. So Shakti, when we began our program, we had some thoughts in mind about what percentage would actually then take that leap, because a lot of people were coming to explore, right? To understand what they didn't know and sort of see how they could engage, how they could bring their skill sets to, to contribute, but really exploratory. And for me, the great news is that I think almost everyone crosses over. And by that, I don't mean like a full-time role, but just it could be, you just develop that that social conscience in a more, I mean, it's always there, I'm not judging, but I'm just saying, you could be a volunteer, you become an active volunteer, you could, sit on nonprofit boards, you could take back a lot of the learning that you've had into your workplace and build more around sustainable practices, understanding gender, understanding equity, privilege. It helps, it informs in decision making. So for us, it's really embedding something in your heart and in your mind, as a muscle that will go with you wherever. Of course, we want people to cross over. There's so much work to be done. We are, as you know, 131st out of 180 countries. Even Sri Lanka is way ahead of us in human development indices. Yes. We need all citizens to be engaged with the social sector. But for us, while the people that go through our leadership program, more than 90% engage. Very few will not engage. I mean, I can't even think of anyone that's not engaging, but the levels of engagement differ, and that we respect. Not everyone may make the transition into a full-time role immediately or even at all, but they're all doing their bit, and that's important. Some have become social entrepreneurs, such as some are sitting on nonprofit boards, some are just actively volunteering, some are just writing a lot more, and also, adopting sustainable living practices. There are so many things you do at home that are important. So for us, that's the good news. There's no going back. Once you come here, there's no going back. It stays in your heart.
Excellent. Yeah, before this conversation, to me, the crossover was only was a term which I applied to people who actually took that leap and who gave up their corporate sector jobs to move to the social sector. But now I'm hearing you say that that need not be the case, that even someone who, if there is a change in heart in someone, that person has sort of crossed over. If that person is applying some of the learnings from the ILSS program without, whilst retaining, her or his corporate sector job, that person is still a crossover, right? So can you give us some examples? Can you give us some examples of the type of work that people, from ILSS are doing? People who actually made the leap and people who've not made that leap. And if you could just give us a few examples, and then I'd like to just sort of build up on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, several examples. There are so many of you all, and many of you are here in the audience. So hi to you. So many, coming with, like, say, a strong marketing background, saying, hey, I come from marketing. What am I going to do in the development sector? Hey, you could do campaigns, you could do advocacy, you could do communication, you could even do branding. I mean, it's all important, right? It's communicating the work that needs to be, sort of amplified. So there is a lot of, almost 70–80% of what you bring is transferable. And then the rest is context, right? So, we have, I can take names. We have Pratik, who's working with tribals in skilling, upskilling. We had Mohit, who's been a part of the Air Pollution Action Group. So now, one of the few nonprofits invited by the central government actually to talk around air pollution. We have Lata, Dr. Lata, who actually is a doctor, but she also believes very strongly in waste management and especially medical waste. So she runs her own nonprofit on the side, which is on waste, medical hazardous waste management. So innumerable, there's Ishmeet, who's working in Bihar on public health with Piramal. There are, like I said, there are almost 300 of you, and all of you are doing incredible work in your own way. So I would need a couple of days to talk about all the work, Shakti, but yeah, just a few names.
But Anu, what about people who don't move full-time into the social sector? How do you think they are applying their learnings from, whilst retaining their corporate sector job? How would that be?
I mean, in every decision making, Shakti, when you make decisions now, you have that extra lens, right? You look at every problem with many lenses now. Right. You've been, you've spent time understanding gender. You've understood your privilege. You understood communities. You've understood environment. So I think it's wherever you go, there's a new sort of lens. As Anshu says, wo chashma aa gaya hai, to see things with an extra perspective or a new layer, which is always helpful, right? It's always helpful to have fresh perspectives.
Right. Yeah, and if I may just make a comment, it's also partly a question. See, the work you're doing is pretty phenomenal in terms of getting the corporate sector people interested in the social sector. And this webinar, we said, was going to be on the synthesis between the two sectors. But what about a reverse wave flow? Yeah, it's and I know you recently launched your program for, skilling people to, take on board positions from the corporate sector into the social sector. But why are we not seeing that reverse happening? And isn't this a space ILSS would want to look at? Yeah, why don't we? Shouldn't we be even having representatives from the community onto boards of corporations, or shouldn't we be having people from the social sector also, looking for options in CSR divisions or sustainability now? ESG is a big thing. So, what your take on that is? How do you think? What do you feel about the reverse flow?
Absolutely, Shakti. Absolutely. If you have to understand your end, if you have to understand your community, your society, and the work, it's how do you not look? I mean, it's almost like living in an ivory tower if you didn't engage, right? So I think absolutely, for sure, I think we need to have a movement. There is probably already a movement. It's, because we do the crossover this way, it doesn't mean that there is not a absolutely legible. I do believe that there's a huge convergence happening. I have had more, not only corporates, but even within the corporate with the whole ESG debate and, understanding planet, purpose, people, and the triple bottom line. There is a lot of conversation in the private sector, but getting people from the development sector, it makes sense. They bring powerful insights that could be hugely useful. Otherwise, you are making decisions like, I had a professor of, political economist who was talk about the air-conditioned offices of the Planning Commission. So how do you decide public policy if you're not going to be on the ground? So the same sort of applies, right? People who actually understand communities, understand the work on the ground, bring tremendous insights. And if you tapped into that vast knowledge, it just helps better decision making, right? So yes, of course. Absolutely. But what is your experience, Shakti? Because you've been a part of IBM, clearly very evolved organization, and you have your corporate colleagues still. How have you seen any of this sort of cross movement into the private sector from the development sector?
So I know I haven't really, okay, so let me put it this way. I know that there's a crying need within CSR divisions for people with social sector skills. For example, one of the persons that we regularly interact with, one of the IT companies, the head of India CSR has a background from TIS. We have, and I've seen this even at IBM, that when I was at IBM, we had Rumi come in from the NASSCOM Foundation. So you've had people who, who've come with that experience, but I don't see any, I haven't seen the equivalent of an ILSS, trying to, sort of the way you're kind of transforming corporate sector professionals to be empathetic about, community and about, social purpose. I feel that there is also the need to have, just to make the whole process seamless. I feel there's also the need for people in the social sector to be given an opportunity and to be guided, trained to be able to be influencers in the corporate sector. Yeah, and for that you need an understanding and an appreciation of the corporate sector, just as I need an understanding of and an appreciation of the social sector when I make that crossover to the nonprofit sector. Yeah, so it was, that was the context in which, I brought this out.
No, in fact, one of the things at ILSS we do, other than the leadership program, which is of course corporate, senior corporate leaders who are trying to understand the sector and understand the context. We are also doing a lot of programs for developing development sector leaders. So, upskilling. Historically, Shakti, as you know, there's never been funding. It's a sector that has starved for capacity, capacity building. Most of the money would be, unfortunately, for the end beneficiary, not enough for organization building, and that's changing. So that's the good news. There are lots of very evolved philanthropists who are saying, hey, you need to strengthen the org as well, right? So we do. So ILSS has been spending time building out programs to support, and I can tell you and I say this again and again, the toughest job today would be the CEO of a nonprofit. It's got to be the toughest. There's no enabling environment. Funding is a stretch. Talent is a stretch. It's just, and work is complex and challenging. So I think it's, where is that ecosystem that's supporting them, right? And so ILSS really wants to do that very much, to build an enabling environment for the development sector leaders, to thrive. So we have a fundraising program. We have now people practices, but it's really all the things you need as a CEO of an organization to thrive. And there is good, there is growing awareness that you need to fund for leadership, So that's good. I feel very optimistic about where we are headed in the development sector. So yeah.
Great. Anu, if I may just ask you one more question. and related to this thread. And I've seen this with my own eyes. There's a very few, very tiny number of cases of people who kind of moved to the social sector and then, sort of crossed back. They went back to a corporate sector job. Yeah, I know of just a very few cases, but to what extent does it really, would it make sense? I mean, does it make sense to have people who are aspiring to move from the corporate sector to the social sector, or even vice versa, to get them to do short-term stints in the social sector, to try it out? It could be through volunteering, or it could be through employee engagement or skill-based volunteering. What are your thoughts on that? And is that something that ILSS is also encouraging? Yeah, to get people to try out, to taste and sample that. I mean, the immersive experience you offer is splendid, but beyond that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Shakti, because we place, as you know, we have a very strong placement. See, for us at ILSS, it's not about running programs. It's really about seeing the impact of bringing in more talent. Any sector. It could be the banking sector. You and me were part of the IT sector. Talent is the fuel, right? And so when you're bringing in talent or upskilling talent, that's what will strengthen the sector. So for us, it was, sorry, I lost my train of thought while I was talking, when I was trying to explain.
For the skill-based, would it make sense to have somebody kind of do a sample project, a volunteering project before actually making that leap, and wouldn't your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. It came back to me. So while we do placements, because we do place people in nonprofit, and we placed so many now, more than circling close to 100 in various kinds of organizations, nonprofits, foundations, think tanks, etc., academic institutions. We have learned that it's often better to start slow. You're a senior resource. You're coming into a very different environment. Whatever all said and done, with all the processes in place, the social sector still operates a little bit like a startup. It's, you have to roll up your sleeves and get going. There's no ecosystem of support, right? So just that reorientation takes some time. And it's not like it won't happen. But we always, Shakti, suggest to our leaders, especially when they're really eager to move and so on, we say, take your time. Offer to actually work pro bono for a couple months, it's okay. But, make that, because if a senior resource moves and then doesn't stay, it hurts every which way. It hurts the organization. It certainly hurts them. So we do actually encourage that a lot, that go slow rather than fast. We usually place our leaders in about, I would say, 4 to 6 months, not before that, unless it's some crazy situation, because we want them to actually take their time and decide, volunteer, spend some time, shadow, whatever it takes, but then make a more informed decision, right? So yeah. So I absolutely do feel
that's an incredible approach, Anu. I think take your time. I think that's a lovely maxim. Yeah, I think we have a whole lot of questions in the Q&A box. So maybe we should just hand this over to Isha.
Hello. Thank you, Shakti, and thank you, Anu, for this wonderful conversation around crossing over. We have actually a lot of questions, and what I'm going to do is bunch some of the similar ones together, because a lot of them are around tips and tricks around crossing over as a mid or senior career professional, and some are around the threats the sector might feel when a lot of crossovers come in, and that's a tricky one. Starting with a very unusual question by John, which was the first question. He speaks about shows like Shark Tanks, where there is investment. And paraphrasing it, can there be something like that for Indian social sector or social sector in general, where different non-profits pitch their projects, causes, and how would that work out? Specifically for altruistic donors, possibly one or multiple fronts to derive awareness, interest, and understanding. What are your thoughts around that, Anu and Shakti? This question is to Anu, but Shakti, please feel free to jump in.
No, absolutely. And John, is it John?
Yes.
It was John who asked that. So John, yeah, great question, because there is something called the Dolphin Tank that recently a group of people did. We do want to create that enabling environment. It's just like the startup ecosystem a few years ago, maybe 5-7 years ago, didn't have that environment. But can we create that? And ILSS is actually thinking about it. We won't call it Shark Tank, but maybe a Dolphin Tank, gentler word. But maybe create an enabling environment where people can actually pitch their ideas, pitch their thoughts, and have philanthropists talk to them and see what excites them, and be that bridge. So and it has been done once recently. I know Govind was involved with that. I don't know if it was an SVP initiative, but there was an initiative recently that someone had done, and it's something very much that we feel like for us, we want to do whatever it takes to create that environment. And so we would, we definitely believe we'd like to do that sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Anu. Actually, now I'm going to jump to a question which is, as I said, is slightly on the tricky line. This is for Anu specifically. How can we diminish the perceived threats that the sector feels, which is the social sector, at times, as we have more crossovers from the corporate sector, specifically at senior levels? And this is a threat can come from middle level people who have done their social work degrees, been in the sector, been in the ground, have slummed it out. And when then you see somebody coming from a very, very fancy organization and just being your boss without knowing the ground, or maybe knowing the ground, how do you work around this perceived threat, which is very, very real for mid-level professionals in the sector?
No, absolutely, Ishan. It's a great question. And it's something we do think about. I come from a lens of we have many problems. And what are some of the skill sets that fortunately the private sector have developed, right? What are they? Where there was understanding change management, building scale. And those are skill sets that would help any organization thrive. So I come from more an abundance, because it's not like we have finite problems. We have a lot of problems and we need to build. So it's a complementarity. I'm not seeing it as a competition, but I think for every organization that grows, that scales, there's space for people to grow as well. So if you approach it from the fact that I bring certain skill sets from being rooted in the sector, but they might be bringing skill sets that I don't have. Maybe it's technology, or maybe it's just finance or compliance or governance. It only strengthens the sector. So, you can look at a glass half full. It's like our fundraising program, Isha. When we have our cohorts, we always talk about the fact that there's a lot of money out there. So let's not feel like if I learn and you learn, we take away from the third person. I mean, as I never tire of saying, Tirupati has 14,000 crores in FD. What are we saying? There's a lot of money out there. I mean, I'm very happy they have that, but I'm just saying, let's come from an abundance that there are infinite problems and we need everyone to be a part of it. So I think if anybody's coming in to strengthen an organization, you will also be strengthened in the process. So there is enough room as organizations scale for all kinds of leadership to emerge. So it's not taking away from anybody. It's, you're building complementary skills. Shakti, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say, I just add one thing to that. And this has come up before also. I think where this can be sorted out at ILSS and all the other programs, and you're already doing this, but maybe this just needs to be reinforced. And it was actually beautifully reinforced by Anshu Gupta of Gunj. He says the problem with the donor mindset is that the donor is here and the beneficiary is here. And I think that is something which needs to be nipped, needs to be corrected at source. And the way I have approached the social sector is that, look, I'm as much a receiver as the counterpart in, we're all in it together. So I don't think along the lines of being a receiver or a donor. I'm donating my time, if not my money. Yeah, it's a question more in terms of which I know sort of prevails in the social sector, and that is where the the cause for resistance is coming. But it's a question of just, it's an attitudinal change, and I think many people who take that leap have been have gone through that transformation process. Yeah, not everyone who's working who's crossed over has crossed over through an ILSS. Yeah, which is why I think a program like an ILSS is really, really very important for cultural sensitization, for building empathy. That is what is very crucial. And the moment that comes in, I think people will embrace each other. Yeah, so that's just my outlook on this.
No, so I just want to correct. I just want to say something. I have seen incredible generosity in the development sector. Incredible. ILSS literally stands on the shoulders of nonprofit leaders who embraced what we were trying to do because they understood that we were coming from a place of support. Initially, there were some trepidations. I will be honest, in the early years, 2018, on even getting senior leaders. But now we almost can't keep up with demand because there is an understanding that we are instilling humility, listenability, a learning mindset. So while they bring skill sets, they're not bringing arrogance. They're not coming from a savior mindset. They're coming from a mindset of deep empathy and appreciation, because it's far more tough here, than anything you may have experienced. I can tell you that. And so I absolutely feel like if there were reservations, I'm not sensing it anymore. I think there's an absolute openness to embrace good people and leaders. And it's just been a very, very generous space, which has, supported us at ILSS from this young organization trying to do good, just with their time, with their input. So I can't speak highly enough for social sector leaders and the, just the kind of collaboration, cooperation I have experienced.
Thank you so much, Anu and Shakti, for this perspective, which is very, very important for, and also just a little bit of trivia, the first ever social work college in India was started by the Tatas, who were corporate house themselves. So
Correct.
That really reiterates the point that the way is collaboration. Coming to the most popular question in the Q&A box, and this is to both of you, 2 to 3 strategies, tricks, insights of crossing over to the sector, while crossing to this sector, while being in this process in Mindspace. 3 top of your head things you would suggest.
Sorry, I didn't get. Can you just repeat that? What was the question?
3 things which you think are essential for people to consider when they're crossing over, or they've already crossed over to the sector from the corporate side of things. And this is a popular question in the Q&A box to both of you.
Okay, so the 3 things for crossing over to the social sector is essentially I was put the number one consideration is, am I going to be guided by universal values? Yeah, it's not that universal values are absent in the corporate sector. Yeah, it's just that this gets a lot more amplified when you try and make that move. Yeah, there's many corporations that are very good at universal values. At IBM, we had a great policy and a culture for diversity and inclusion. Yeah, I see that as a universal value. Yeah, but when you're stepping out of the corporate world and you're looking at the social sector, yeah, then you're looking at really dedicating your life to your work, to seeing those universal values being translated into reality. Yeah, I think that is really that would be the fundamental the fundamental consideration. Am I up to it? Am I cut out for it? Or would I rather sort of be at a bar every night and have my ball? Yeah, so so I think that really is the fundamental, the first thing. The second thing that I would say is that to make this move and to make it very strategic, yeah, am I going to be looking at treating just symptoms, or am I also going to be looking at trying to address root causes? And I think that's where crossovers can really play they can play a very good role both ways, but there's great potential for corporate sector professionals to also start thinking systemically. So this whole thing about systems change, I've just only been seeing this as a buzzword quite recently. I don't know if it was around 5 years ago. I'm talking about the term. Yeah, I'm sure people have been from the time of immemorial, from Baba Sahib Ambedkar onwards, there's been people who've been reforming systems. Yeah, but this the new buzzword of systems change is something which is, so is that something that would be of interest to the crossover? So I've given two. Maybe I'll leave one to Anu. Anu, maybe you want to add to to add to this, to what I've had to the considerations.
No, I think for anywhere to go anywhere, you need to have some, it's an attitude thing. You will succeed wherever you go if you have a certain mindset that is sort of a learning mindset, a growth mindset. There's so much to understand, unlearn, relearn. If you're very hardwired, the world is changing. Forget moving into the development sector. You're just navigating the world and, career transitions. You got to have a different kind of mindset where you can have, and you can do it through a lot of reading or through a lot of conversations. At ILSS, for everything we do, we have 100 conversations because you're always checking with people and trying to, because I could be baking this cake. If nobody wants to eat it, what's the point, right? So let's understand what people are seeking. And so I think for anyone to succeed, it's, there's one thing that's another thing. Do it for yourself. If you feel like, oh, I have to give back, I hate that. I think pay it forward. That's fine. But do it because you're doing it for yourself. You're not coming here for anybody else. You're coming here for yourself. So have that humility to learn, to ask questions, to understand that what you're bringing is also important, but there is also amount of learning that you should do. Just self-awareness. I think sometimes, the sector is a very different place. The words you use, it's super important. Did you build that the language? It's super important, that you understand how mindful you need to be. You're dealing with very different issues. And so I think these are things, anyone that has a growth mindset should, will, and then you succeed wherever you go. It's not about just the development sector, but any place that is challenging. If you have some key, if you have your self-awareness, you understand, like you said, why you're doing what you're doing. The why is important. Otherwise, you come with some crazy notion of something, and it's not going to sustain when the rubber hits the road. The social sector is hard. It's a hard place. I mean, it's not easy. So come with understanding that, come with the right mindset, I would say. I think that's important.
So Anu, just to connect the dots, when we were having this discussion about the donor and the the receiver. So the phrase that you just used, do it for yourself, is exactly what I had meant, right? So even if I'm a donor, whether it's my time or my money, I am also a beneficiary. So the problem today in the social sector, and just going back to the earlier question, is there's this whole thing about donor and beneficiary. I don't like either of the two words. I think both sides are beneficiaries. But the parlance today is a beneficiary is someone who is lesser fortunate, who's receiving. A donor is someone who's more fortunate. So I think what you just said right now, do it for yourself, is really that key to bringing about the harmony between the two sectors, because that's how I approach it. Look, I am very much a beneficiary. This journey has been immensely fulfilling. So for me, I'm the biggest beneficiary of this. Yeah, so that was just the context.
No, absolutely. In fact, I recently heard a wonderful nonprofit leader talk about, and he said, I don't call them stakeholders, I call them my clients. Because there is, again, when you call them your clients, it's more equal. When you call them a beneficiary or a stakeholder, there is a sense of unequalness. And I thought that's so important. See, these are the things we do discuss, it's how you then view people, right? If you call them your clients, then there's a different lens you apply. So I thought that was a wonderful thing he said, which I've taken to heart. So yeah.
Thank you, Shakti. What you've done is covered a lot of the questions which were there around culture, around resistance to corporates, around the social sector, feeling slightly uncomfortable with inflow, why do you need to do this, and how do you work around these two culture shifts? I only, given that we're at time, I will have only two questions, which is around the younger workforce. There is a question which says that a lot of times the younger workforce which is entering the sector do it for CV building, going on to a Harvard Business School, doing it for 2 years, and then never coming back to the sector. Happens with all the fellowships all the time, and it's a trend which is hurting the sector. And in this scenario, something like ILSS actually fills that gaps from the top, because you have a sustained leadership who are doing it for themselves. What is your take on that? What is happening with a young mid-level workforce in the sector? And is it worrying? It's to both
Shakti,
of you.
That's a question for Anu, right?
It's a question for Anu, but I offer it to both of you.
So this is a very cynical, it's true, but this broad generalization worries me for anything. I was at, and I've always talked about this, when I was at Ashoka University, my students, my postgraduate program students were millennials, right? So I think I could do a PhD on millennials. And I remember the thing that struck me was the choices they were making. We made very simple choices. When I was, going to take a job, I was looking for that MNC at that point, right? But no, with at least at the Young India Fellowship at Ashoka University, they were making a lot more, riskier in a way choices. Social entrepreneurs getting into policy, getting into field work. We even started a Mother Teresa Fellowship to support some of them who actually wanted to work in the grassroots. So I saw a very different engagement, much more than my generation for sure. And yeah, maybe some are building a CV, but public service, once it enters you, it doesn't leave you. So it's fine. Go ahead, do that too. Hey, listen, whatever works. There's no one way or one path, right? So for me, the younger generation has actually shown us the way by the choices they make. I have a very, relative to me, certainly young team, but just brilliant, all making these choices to be in the development sector. They could be anywhere, but that's the choice they make. So I don't agree that it's, it could be a path, and that's fine too. I don't judge anyone for wanting to build a CV doing this. That's okay. You'll still learn, you'll still help, and that's fine too.
Great. Thank you, Anu and Shakti, so much. I know there are a lot of unanswered questions, and I hope we have covered larger themes around it. Whatever questions are left, we will be sure to address this in the survey, which will go right after this webinar ends automatically in your Zoom. So please key in your question there, and we'll try our best to get back to you on this. Now we are exactly at time, but my quick takeaways from what we heard from Shakti and Anu is, I think the one is, do it. If you're crossing over, do it for yourself. The second, for me, the most important one will be that once you come here, you're not going to leave, because there's so much and more to do. Third would be, it's a place for all. So feeling around culture that I might not be accepted, that could happen across sectors, across cultures. At least over here, the goal is to do something for your country and build the nation. So if you can collaborate more, well and good. And there will be teething troubles, but it's on you to sort of embrace that and move forward. And the last bit being on the younger generations, they're actually showing us the way, choosing these careers from the word go and not waiting for 20 years in a bank to then moving to the sector. They are choosing to do this when they get out of college, studying liberal arts. So that's where we summarize this. Thank you, everyone, being part of this. Anu and Shakti, any last words?
Thank you, Isha, and thank you, Anu. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, Shakti.
Sincere thanks to you.
And thank you, PYXERA.
Thank you, PYXERA.